And to our panel, this is a timer. I will only use this for the first round of questions, and after that I will only intervene if it's time for a pledge break. Now remember, time is everything on TV, so think of this as a temporal aid. My first question in 1 minute or less, and I will start with you, Norman. What do you think is the biggest obstacle to inclusive education, and give me one thing you are doing to overcome it?
Time limits.
That's great.
Sorry, that didn't count. I thought about this last night, and I came up with, one day I thought about my experience going in regular school. And I thought, why did it actually work quite well? And the answer I came out with one I didn't expect it. I think it worked well because we didn't do inclusion. We just worked on getting me educated. So in a strange way, I think the term inclusion is a big obstacle for inclusion.
And, well done, you even got a joke in. I'll move the same question to you, Cheryl, the biggest obstacle and one thing you're doing to overcome it.
With good instruction and good supports, every kid with disabilities can learn a lot more than we ever thought was possible. So the way that I'm incorporating that idea of high expectations into my work is by helping other people see that the least dangerous assumption we can make is to presume that somebody's competent. Because even if we're wrong about that presumption, that's not as dangerous as doing the opposite.
Okay, and we're going to go next to you, Joe, for the same question.
I think the biggest obstacle continues to be us. And I say that in hopes not to be misunderstood, or certainly not to dishonor the fact that you're here today because you care. But our democracy is built on participation and engagement. And along those lines, we need to maintain that every one of us has an infinite and incalculable value. And when we look at what's valued in our society, it is most worrisome. Just open up People magazine or any of the media, and beauty and thinness, tallness are the values.
Thank you. Isaiah, we'll go to you next. What is the single biggest obstacle, and what are you doing?
Okay, well, we have a wicked big obstacle in my school. We've got a special ed room, and it's over on in the 600 wing, the end of the school, and they call it the inclusion room, which get it. And what we can do to overcome that is if we just have those kids participated more, and whoops,
it's okay,
and just sit with them at lunch, make them feel welcome, and then they'll enjoy participating, because I think what we're doing now is not enough, and the teachers don't really, or not the teachers, but some aides that I've met, paraprofessionals, they don't really know how to make it fun and also include them at the same time, I guess.
good.
Very good. Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, okay.
Take a crack.
I've been talking to a lot of people around the country in the last year, and I find that there's a perception out there, real or not real, that including kids with behavior and emotional challenges is the biggest challenge and the biggest obstacle for administrators, for teachers. So what I'm doing to approach that is doing my next film on that topic, on looking at the inclusion of kids with emotional and behavioral challenges, and looking at it as a school-wide approach. That isn't just about including these kids and creating inclusion, but looking about how do we really create schools that are welcoming and educational for all children, period. And I'm going to do a similar model where I look at some of the challenges very honestly, but also look at some models that are happening both in New Hampshire and around the country that have been successful, so that other people can be inspired and hopefully replicate some of them.
Very good. Barbara Bryan, we'll go to you.
Thanks. I've been thinking a lot about this, wondering what makes inclusion work, what makes inclusion not work. And I think it comes down to that we look at the disability. We look from administrators to specialists to teachers to parents to paras, and we look at the disability and we talk about the disability that's coming into our classroom, not the child. And I think we need to every time go back to it's a child coming to our classroom, not a disability, and that's where all the information needs to go. So I've been rewording a lot of conversations I'm having with teachers when they're saying, oh my goodness, I have 22 children and 3 have disabilities, and I'm saying, oh, you have 22 children? It's not going over well, but I'm still working on it.
Good. That's great.
Keith Jones, we'll wrap up with you. What do you think is the single greatest obstacle to inclusion, and one thing you're doing to overcome it?
Well, the single greatest obstacle to inclusion is the fact that education, period, is not valued. We value a lot more about status, symbol, political connections. Joe Petner said it best, People magazine, they didn't put me on the cover yet, but I'm working on it. And I think the fact that we downgraded education, and it's about money versus about accomplishment. It's about constraining resources versus giving every child the opportunity to explore their full potential. The one thing I'm doing about it is doing things and doing events like this, and hopefully maybe changing an idea too.
In watching the film, you spoke about having to originally go to a separate high school that tried to occupy your time with, as you put it, paste and popsicle sticks. My basic question to you is, how did you survive that experience to then go on and really, become an advocate for yourself?
But again, this goes back to family. My family basically said, if you want to have a life, you need to be educated. If you want to have an income, you need to get a job. And we know that the better educated you are, the better job you get, the more money you can make. So the expectation was always there that we would succeed. So the way I survived it was relying on the strength of my family to constantly go back, because there were always days where somebody would call you cripple or drooly or try to fight you or things like that. And it would really boil down to, you have to believe in yourself. And your parents have to instill that in you. And if I did not be able to believe in myself, I probably wouldn't have survived it. But in the same time, I also question teachers who are in education who pick and choose who they want to educate. Then the question then becomes, why are you in education? Then the question becomes, why do you teach? Because if you don't want to teach me, then leave me the chalk and I'll teach you.
Cheryl, one thing comes to mind from what Keith is saying, and that is that because he was such a strong advocate for himself, you, or indeed you, Joe, do you find that when students come in, that any appreciable percentage of them are actually self-advocates as opposed to simply being brought by parents?
Something we're doing at the University of New Hampshire is we're making an intentional commitment to including people with disabilities as instructors in our courses, so that when future teachers or future speech language pathologists or future occupational therapists are learning about this thing that we all call disability, they're learning about it from the perspective of people who are living that life. And one of my co-teachers doesn't use her voice to communicate, and she uses a wheelchair to get around. And at the beginning of the semester, they look at her as not very competent. And by the end of the semester, they realize that even though she can't speak, she really does have a lot to say. So I think we need to make sure that everything we're doing at the university level, events like this, policy levels, that we're making sure to include people with disabilities as sort of the people leading and driving the effort. Mm-hmm.
Norman, I have to say, I find you a provocative thinker. In the film, you said that you would turn down a cure because that would take away much of your identity. So first, I'm curious, by the way, about how our audience feels about that comment, if you think it provocative. And I would invite your comments or questions about it. And Norman, my first question to you is, what reaction do you get to that from other activists?
Other activists or other people? No, really, because a lot of non-disabled people tend to be quite bewildered by that. They go, you won't want to run? You won't, but surprisingly, the vast majority of disabled people, not all people, but the vast majority of disabled people have said personally and in writing, I get it. And I think to sum it up, because there's no doubt, would I like to be able to play the drums better? Yes. Would I like to be able to jump around my sailboat quicker? Yes. So there's no doubt the frustration is there, the energy, the constant output of energy. But the way I sum it up is that whether each disabled person would want to be cured or not cured isn't really the interesting question. The really interesting question is, if I were cured, what would be gained and what would be lost? I think for me at least, what I have gained through being disabled is forced me to live in a world without comparison. Because if I live in that world of comparison, I usually lose. So I either have to say, I'm the problem, or I say the criteria of comparison is the problem. When you can really differentiate yourself from that pervasive comparison that exists in our society, and really not do that, not say, am I more or less of a man than Dan or Chris or you, but that I am who I am. It is profoundly liberating.
Now, we've heard about People magazine, we've heard Norman's comments right here. Panel, I would ask you, what do you think are the strategies to adopt to fight that fight?
I think that part of it is really looking at what is value to our society. I mean, I really think that people have told me, who know Samuel, people in his life like Barbara and others, on a day-to-day basis, have said even without this film, even if this film had never been done, Samuel has had a profound effect on their life. And I actually would say that Samuel has had a more profound effect on more people's lives than a lot of adults will have in their whole lifetime. And I don't say that just because Samuel's my son and he's a great kid. I think a lot of people could make that claim who have lived a bold and loving life, even at the age of 9. That's value to me in our society. Value is not just being the star quarterback, the cheerleader, the man who makes, or the woman who makes millions of dollars. So we have to really look at what is value and what should be cherished in our society.
You know, Isaiah, I had a question for you because you really made a big impression with the love and the protectiveness that you showed for your little brother Samuel, as we saw in the film. I'm wondering, on a personal basis, was it tough for you, or do you think for your family, to share so much of your story to really everybody who sees the film?
Well, I didn't really have a problem with it. Like, my mom did. I had to say that. And, but like, I think it's better for the world and it's like for everyone to see like what we have to go through on a daily basis for them to like fully understand like how we do it and how we get through the day. So, I mean, I think it's just helped.
Do you feel you've become part of something bigger?
Yeah, well, I mean, this whole experience has made me like a better person, and I would not like, I don't really know how to explain it, but I would not be like that. Like Samuel has made me wicked patient, and you know, like you know how he takes like a little bit to say what he really wants to say. Well, like since I have grown up with him, he's like my little brother. He like the part where he's saying that he wanted to be an astronaut. I would have like if I had never met him, I would have been like, come on, hurry up, you know. But him being my brother and all that, I'm expecting. Well, not expecting, but I'm more like patient with him, so it's better, I guess.
With other people too, probably.
Yeah, like with other people, you know, as friends, we've got like 4 kids on our street who go to the same school, are in the same class, and they, like growing up with him and stuff, they know how to be his friend. They know like his limits. They know what he can do and stuff, and so yeah.
One of the things that we have to do is, I think people need to be honest about disability advocacy, first and foremost, because there's a disability pyramid, and mental illness usually is at the bottom of it, because it's a hidden disability, and you spend all your time trying to convince people, no, really, I have one. And then when you figure out you got one, you're like, no, really, it doesn't matter. I think, and also we need to be honest about it because there is a stigma really attached to mental illness. There's a stigma attached to physical disabilities because people always want to pray and heal you. Like, oh Lord, let's heal this man so he can walk. And then when I get up, they go, oh my God, it really worked. But for you, I think, you know, and it has to be an individual choice because the whole disability movement is about not being separate from, but being a part of. If you feel more comfortable in a treatment setting or in a group home setting or whatever, it needs to be your choice. If somebody says you may or may not have the mental capacity to make that choice, then apparently they don't have the mental capacity to believe that you do have the ability to make that choice. So it really has to come from what makes you comfortable, what makes you happy, what are your dreams and what are your goals and what are your hopes. And if the path that you've chosen seems to be the best for you, then that should be your path. Because nobody, not your parents, not your friends, not even your loved ones will be able to walk that path for you. You have to walk that path for yourself. So that would be the choice. You make that choice for yourself.
Because there's a lot of growing body of literature on what makes children and adults resilient. And they say there are basically 3 things that enable people to be resilient. And when I really looked at my own life, I really found them to be true. First thing they say, humor. Some ability to see the absurdity of life and laugh at it, you know, to get constant sense of humor. The second thing they say was interesting. They talked about, I can't remember the exact word, but rational or healthy disengagement. So to see what was going on around me as something out there, not necessarily let it define who I am. Or a process of differentiation. So I can see the way our society sees disability in a medical model, but I don't have to do that. And the third thing they said was a relationship with a healthy or a person that was both able to be supportive but also be a mirror to reality, to give you a really good sense of what's going on. And it's in that last idea that I would like to talk to you more, or offer one idea that I have in my own life. If I could do something different in my high school, the one thing I probably think I would have done is I would have been more intentional and doing something, but getting a coach, getting some kid who could go, Norman, don't do that. Don't wear that jacket. No, that haircut looks dumb. And, you know, that ability, very often in our society, we think we have to do this alone, figure it out alone. And I think that if I had had some person other than my parents, and parents make really bad, give really bad advice when you're a teenager. And I know this because I have a parent, and my kids go, no, wrong. But I see my older daughter, when my daughter, who's older than my son, when they were in high school, my daughter served as a coach to my son. They went, that is really valuable, and I wish I had have had that. So if I could offer you one very pragmatic suggestion, is that there's someone you feel a great deal of respect and friendship for, to perhaps take a chance and be vulnerable and say, you know, I would really appreciate your help in this way. So that's one idea I would offer you.
Thank you, Norman. Joe.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to the question with this idea of UDL, which is, in the jargon of education, Universal Design for Learning. I want to rename that a little bit, Universal Design for Living. And when you think about this, it's really about people first. So the things that Norman described are really the things that make us human. That is, inside we're all the same. We want friends, we want to feel we belong, we want to have people love us and feel that we're being productive in our lives. And I think we have got to reorient ourselves because when we think about it as disability, and I think this is one of the powerful messages of this video, is that we're human, that Dan has given voice and face to people and their lives. And I think that is so important as a life lesson for us all. I'm one of those old people that Keith refers to, and I certainly want to feel in my agingness that I belong and I'm part of a community based.
Barbara, I believe, well, tell people how much training and preparation that you had for having Samuel in your class.
I didn't have any training or preparation. I actually fought to have Samuel in my class. I had had Isaiah for first grade and second grade and knew him well and knew his parents well. Did not know that much about Samuel besides that he loved Red Sox, he loved to learn, he loved life. And in the beginning of the year, I sent home a little piece of paper asking tell me about your child, anything I should know about your child. And I wish I'd kept them, but the Habib McNamara about Isaiah was, he loves life, he has lots of energy, he loves books. And when Samuel's came in, he loves life, he loves energy, he has energy, he loves books. They never mentioned the other parts of Samuel because they weren't needed. We had our little meetings along the way to set up how I should set my classroom up and the things I needed to do, but they made him first again. It wasn't his disability. I think we need teachers to go into the universities and teach this. I think a lot of times we get university professors who haven't taught for a while. So I think they need to get in there and teach how we go about this, what my role is in an IEP, what my role is.
Did you do a lot of improvising along the way?
I think so. I think so. I think I've been teaching 28, I'm going to my 29th year, and I think inclusion has always been dear to me because I want all the kids in my room at all times. I don't like them to go anywhere else. I fight for them to stay all the time in the room so I know what they're doing and I'm in charge. It's kind of a little leadership problem there. But I do think there is a lot more learning to be done.
Can I add to something that Barbara said? I think there's one thing that no amount of training, no amount of film, no amount of discussion can overcome, and that's a lack of leadership from administrators, from superintendents, from principals, from special ed directors. I honestly believe that. I believe that if a principal, superintendent, special ed director does not set out a clear vision that we want this to be the way our school operates, we want to include all kids, we believe that is our mission, I don't believe any degree of training or any degree of innovative teaching can really overcome that. And so I think a great leader at an administrative level sets out that vision very clearly and very boldly, and then supports teachers and staff with what they need to be successful. So it is training, it is technology, it is good curriculum, it is universal design classrooms, it is proper staffing, some of which costs money, some of which is money we're already spending. We're just spending it much of the time in separate classrooms or in putting kids out of district placement for $150,000 a year, where that money can be repurposed into a district and benefit all kids.
When teachers come up to me and say, I don't have enough training to deal with a kid with a disability, the way I usually answers that is by saying, well, how would you know when you had enough training? And after thinking about that for a while, they usually say, when my fear goes away. And I think it's important to say that you could do a 4-week training session with UNH or someone and do 8 hours a day. And at the end of that 4 weeks, you would still be afraid. And I think what happens is when you first walk into that class, that disability is 9/10 of who that kid is. And when you get to know that kid, the disability shrinks down. And yes, it's there, but it's not the defining attribute of that kid. And as that disability shrinks down, so does their fear. So I think training is important, but don't believe that training is going to take away that fear.
I know Joe wanted to add something. Just one quick thing to add to that is parents have a role here too, which is to make sure their teachers and staff know, we know we're going to fail sometimes. We know we're going to struggle sometimes. Don't be afraid to try just because we know we're not going to always succeed. And take that pressure off of teachers. There's no expectation that teachers are perfect or administrators are perfect. All we ask is that you try. That's it. We just want everyone to try.
Yeah, I wanted to respond. The training piece, we've got it all wrong. That is, we've created a specialist group of teachers to work in our schools, and we really need to bring those together. That is, until we have new models, new images, we will continue to have parallel tracks. So we've got our gen ed teachers and our sped teachers, and never the twain shall meet. And we need different models within our schools of education, so that our schools, from the leadership to the work that the teachers do, to the sense that it's our community that we're building, so that all of our parents see that this is a benefit for all of our kids. And so that's the work. When I say us, that's the work we need to do, to be out and to push each other and to push the from our sphere of influence, wherever that touches, whether we're school board members or policymakers or professors or teachers, families, students. We need to push ourselves around thinking differently.
Well, Joe, just to keep the mic for a second, because as we saw in the film, the Haggerty School had developed a reputation for being a very inclusive place. You had developed, I guess you could say, a model for that. Why do you think that that model has not sufficiently spread? Is it too expensive? Is it what do you think the reason is?
Well, I have to tell you, truth in lending, I guess, but the school district didn't own this. And in fact, we let them off the hook. We were such a great model that, yes, they have an inclusive school, and just go to the Haggerty School and see. And the failure was the failure to work on a more systemic level. That is, we worked at it from our own sphere of influence, our community, our school, but we did not influence the larger world in which we lived. And I think that's part of this message is we've got a lot of reform work to do.
Do you think you were regarded as an experiment?
I think we were the token. I think we were the point in which people could sleep at night. You know, we got this inclusive school. In some sense, that worked against inclusion because the proportions of students with disabilities in our school, in a school system of choice, our district representation was about 19%. At number of points over a number of years, we had 29 to 30% of our school, when almost a third of our school were kids with disabilities. I don't blame those parents. They saw that this was important. They saw that this was a way to have their kids have a continuity, a sense of belonging for their elementary years K through 6. So again, we can't let it just be one example.
I don't think any kid likes to be in school. That has nothing to do with disability. That has everything to do with being a kid. But secondly, I think it also goes back to we have to make education fun. I think right now education is a requirement, but there are some requirements that can be fun. You know, when I was in school many moons ago, you know, one of the upshots of the day was recess. And if you track education over the last couple of years, we've consistently cut back on, secondary, activities in school, whether it be choir, whether it be band, whether it be recess. And this has nothing to do with disability. What it does have to do is with the school environment. If the school environment is not conducive to learning, if you're going into a school where the building is falling apart or the teachers are aggravated because they don't have enough time to plan, and then they're placed in places where they have to do high-stakes testing, and then, oh, by the way, you have to include a child that needs a little more attention or a little more work, then it does not make it conducive. And secondly, on the side of the child, you have to ask the student, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? They used to ask that all the time. And if you ask a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? Then feed that thirst, feed that hunger for what they want to be. And I think if you ask somebody whether they have Down syndrome, whether they have ADHD, whether they have deafness, blindness, whether they use crutches or whether they ski, it doesn't matter. The question is, what do you want to be at the end of your educational track? And if you want to be something that is beyond what somebody is presuming of you, then the challenge is to become interested. Do those after school things. Go to the Museum of Science or go to learn how to plant gardens and things like that. So when the student has something that's interesting, sometimes our traditional educational system may not work for everybody. And sometimes we need to think about alternative education in terms of, having creative schools for students who want to be creative, engineering schools for students who want to build things. That's fine. I think what we've gotten trapped into is that we think it's a cookie-cutter society. Is if you put all the kids in one class, everybody's going to learn one way, they're all going to turn out and look like Mr. Peabody. They're not. But the last thing I have to say is that also, just to go back to something we had talked about earlier, the reality of disability is that when you see a person with a visible disability, it challenges people's mortality. Because then people always say, well, oh my God, if that was me, I don't know if I could do it. And if you have that kind of sense and you're a teacher, you don't stop becoming human when you walk through the door and pick up chalk. The reality is whatever prejudices, likes or dislikes come with you into your classroom. And if you cannot contain it, you tend to let it out in different kind of ways. And students want to be challenged. But if you constantly say, oh my God, well, he's disabled, he's not really going to be able to do such, then you are not being what you went to college for.
You know,
teachers can either be the greatest launching pads or they can be the greatest barriers to a child's future.
I think in our society, there's this general presumption that people with disabilities, adults with disabilities, cannot make a contribution to our society. If you work from that presumption, then educating kids with disabilities sort of seen like a charitable act rather than a rational preparation of a citizen to live in the community. So it's sort of like non-disabled kids need education, but for disabled kids, it's sort of a nice thing we do. And then we say, okay, we'll let disabled kids into our classroom. Yes, we'll do this. But we do it with an attitude of benevolence. Like I call it the Jerry Lewis legacy. You know, we think we need to be nice to disabled kids. And well, I think with the two key words that I really valued when I went to a regular school was, first of all, respect. I'd like to have authentic, respectful relationships, like with the other kids, and not just this attitude of benevolence. How do we do respectful support, not benevolence? And the other issue, I think, is innovation. Rather than say, this is a civil rights issue, which I do believe, or this is, you know, what we, politically correct thing to do. We don't have to make it that serious and somber. We can sit back and we can have fun with this. But the whole idea of treating it like an engaging, fun, interesting process of innovation rather than the serious, you know, somber, politically correct idea. It doesn't have to be that serious.
Cheryl, I would go to you on this because in the film, of course, you made this statement: all kids with the right support and the right technology and the right teaching can learn the general education curriculum. And that's a pretty dramatic statement, which I would certainly agree with that. Do you think we need just a massive change in our approach to education itself?
Yeah. I mean, if you're...
Yeah, okay, another sweeping statement.
Go for it.
I think right now it kind of feels like we're tinkering with either the public education system or the university professional preparation system. You know, we're just sort of adding a class at the university so that everybody who's going to become an elementary teacher has to take one class in teaching kids with disabilities. That's not going to do it. It's not going to do it. It is going to take a...
So you feel like somebody's studying it, but nobody's doing anything? Is that the sort of syndrome?
What's going to do it?
Changing the leaders in public education. Because just as a public school teacher needs the support of her principal to make the organization work in a way that classroom can be inclusive, I also need the dean of my college to understand the goals of an inclusive teacher preparation program if I'm really going to do anything more than just tinker or add a little bit on to what teachers know. I need leadership at the university level.
I think we also need to move way beyond the testing, because when the testing results and you don't make your AYP, all of a sudden you're told you don't make it because of the subgroups. And guess who the subgroups are? What they label special ed, ESOL, and that's what we're told. So what do we do then? The questions come down all the time for every meeting, from the last meetings we've had right up through the end of the school year. How are we going to make that goal? And it's never about all the kids. It's not about all the kids in your classroom learning. It's about the subgroups, once again, so we're making that decisive, divisional aspect of teaching once again.
Dan, my question to you is that you had said you had actually posed a question in the film, are there times when inclusion in a regular school is just not going to work? You've gone through a lot of research and a lot of work here. What's your answer now?
Well, a lot of people after the film, they say, well, it's good that you included Emily to show that it couldn't work. And I said, no, that story is much more complicated than that. It's about a young woman who did not really have the proper supports in school, who had peers that were bullying her in school, beyond what's even in the film, throwing meatballs at her, making her pay them to sit next to her in the cafeteria. And then Jan Nesbitt comes on and says, isn't it a shame that we can't provide those supports in a public school environment where everyone can learn? So my answer, very briefly, is we have so far to go before we test this theory of can all kids be included. We have so far to go. We've come a long way, but we have much farther to go.
Okay.
And so to say that we should give up now because a lot of kids can't be included suggests we've come a long way, and we really haven't.
How far have we come in achieving the goals that you outlined in Samuel's story, and how far do we have to go?
Certainly, there is a difference in our society. I think disability is recognized as a disability rather than some sort of strange creature. I think even the simple thing like those accessible parking signs in some way validates our presence and our membership in the community. So that's been a step forward. In terms of education, though, it really does come down to people. And I have worked with school districts that have spent 5, 10, 15 years becoming fully inclusive. And the leadership changes, and 1 year they've gone back exactly where they were 15 years ago. So we keep trying to keep trying to make this change permanent by creating system policies and procedures. But policies and procedures can always be got around. And the only way that a school district becomes inclusive and stays inclusive is through the hearts and minds and commitment of individual people. And you can't replace that with policies and procedures.
Okay, I think we probably have about 1 minute left. Joe, would you like to wrap it up for us?
Yeah, I guess I want to say that in my very bones, and this is 40 years of being in the profession, teaching and education, teaching is the profession of hope. And when I hear Isaiah and others speak, their experience is going to be very different.